Na ir Eglė, gal nuo jūsų pradėkime tada.
Ms. Eglė Žiobienė, shall we start with you? We would be very happy to hear about the situation in Lithuania, about the bullying against LGBTI children and adolescents, and what measures are taken, and how Lithuania looks within the European context.
Ir norėčiau padėkoti Švedijos ambasadoriai Lietuvoje ir ambasadai už nuolatinę paramą. Esam labai dėkingi ir tai yra mums labai svarbu. O kalbant apie LGBT moksleivių padėtį mokykloje, mes ją pradėjome teikti 2017 metais. Visą vasarą atlikome tyrimą, kuriame dalyvavo 600 LGBT moksleivių. Tai kaip Lietuvos kontekste tai yra tikrai nemažas skaičius dalyvių ir jų patirtis analizavome įvairiais aspektais. Mūsų tyrimo duomenys parodė, kad LGBT moksleiviai dažniausiai susiduria su patyčiomis dėl savo seksualinės orientacijos, bet tai nereiškia, kad LGBT moksleiviai nepatiria kitų rūšių patyčių. Tai gali būti patyčios dėl išvaizdos, dėl socialinės padėties ir kitų aplinkybių. Ir kai ta patyčių įvairiausių rūšių visuma susikaupia, tai yra iš tikrųjų labai sudėtingos pasekmės. Ir mūsų tyrimas taip pat labai parodė pavojingas tendencijas, kad mes klausėme moksleivių, iš kur jie sulaukia patyčių ir iš kur jie sulaukia paramos susidūrę su patyčiomis. Moksleiviai patiria patyčias ne tik iš savo bendraamžių, bet ir iš mokytojų mokyklose. Tai mus tikrai labai nustebino. Taip pat apklausoje klausėme, kokia yra reakcija mokytojų ir mokyklos darbuotojų, jeigu moksleivis kreipiasi dėl tokio pobūdžio patyčių. Tai dažniausiai moksleiviai sakė, kad reakcija buvo jokia, arba jeigu ta reakcija buvo, tai jinai buvo netinkama. Tai reiškia, moksleivis prisipažinęs, kad jis patyrė tokios formos patyčios, jisai patiria antrinę viktimizaciją, kai iš jo dar dėl tų patirtų patyčių pasityčiojama arba sakoma, kad na, tai reikėtų elgtis tau vyriškiau arba mergaitiškiau ir tada tu nepatirsi tų patyčių. Mūsų apklausa parodė, kad šių patyčių pasekmės yra labai sudėtingos ir dėl to kenčia ir mokymosi pasiekimai ir neretai moksleivis nesulaukia paramos ir namuose. Tai jeigu vaikas nesulaukia nei tėvų, nei mokytojų paramos, jam nelieka ieškoti tos pagalbos kažkur kitur. Tai dėl to mes labai džiaugiamės, kad pagaliau mums pavyko surinkti didelę pasišventusių savanorių komandą, kuri iš tiesų jau budėjo 360 valandų per metus. Na, o kalbant apie Lietuvos padėtį Europos kontekste, tai turbūt nieko nenustebinsiu, nes mes kai kuriais aspektais šioje apklausoje buvome antilyderiai. Kai kuriais klausimais netgi pasirodėme prasčiau už Bulgariją, kuri visose dažniausiai apklausose netgi prasčiau pasirodo už Lietuvą. Tai būtent tas pagalbos sistemų nebuvimas LGBT moksleiviams
of support systems for LGBT children and adolescents was one of the reasons why Lithuania was in such low position in the European context. You have mentioned that you have established a platform in which both teachers, parents can receive support from volunteers. As far as I know, volunteers have already received some requests for support. Could you share the examples of the support that you have provided? So the platform was launched on the 1st of September. That is the first day when school children start going to school. So as it has been mentioned, we provide support not only to schools, to teachers, to children, but also to parents. Majority of our volunteers are psychologists or have the background of social workers. In the context of the COVID pandemic, majority of the requests are related to the reaction of their parents. Adolescents suddenly realize of their sexual orientation, and they are willing to tell about their orientation to their parents. But prior to telling to their parents, they want to consult psychologists so that he or she could find a better way of telling and revealing his orientation to their parents in order to avoid a negative reaction of their parents. Well, of course, there are cases of bullying from the staff of the school. Now that we have online classes, bullying is spread on the internet as well. So we've received quite a few requests for help on this issue. I believe that there are certain things that every specialist should be aware of, but the fact is that in Lithuania we lack trainings on the topic of the LGBTI. That's why our platform serves as the instrument for others to ask for advice, what to do. Parents also have to deal with their own emotions once they find out when their children reveal about their sexual orientation. Some parents accept a different sexual orientation of their child, some unfortunately no. My question to you is whether you consult, let's say, whether those children who have called the platform volunteers comes back to the specialists of your platform. Do you know the feedback? Well, we are providing continuous consultations. This is the strength of our platform, which means that once a child contacts us for help, a volunteer will continue to communicate with him in the form of messages, which means that one volunteer has a specific case from its very beginning to its very end. So, well, it all depends on whether a child wants to give that feedback, but there is no doubt we need a platform, a specific platform for LGBT children and adolescents, because they tell us that it is the platform that makes them feel safe and secure, and this is the platform that is aware of their problems. Well, if anyone wanted to address the platform, could you give a short instruction as to what they should do and where they should contact? The simplest way would be to visit our website and you will be able to see the platform. The address of our platform is livingwithoutbullying.com. You said that this project is continuous, so for how long it will continue? Yes, it is a continuous project and we will try to ensure its continuity in the future. Jurgita, Smiltė, I have a question to you. What's your view on bullying against LGBT children and adolescents? And do you think that the prevention system is effective in school, whether it works or not? Well, if you allow me, I will start from the wider context. Most probably, it's not only about the case of bullying against LGBTI children. In many cases, when there are instances of bullying, the system does not work efficiently. Some 15 years ago, we didn't even have a concept of bullying. Now, it is an achievement because the concept of bullying is included in our legal acts and schools are obliged to take measures to prevent bullying. When it comes to prevention and intervention, we see that problems exist. When it comes to who is accountable for what, who is responsible for what, these cases have to be recorded, they have to be filed, the information has to be provided to other staff members, to other institutions, and so on. When it comes to the bullying against LGBTI children and adolescents, I believe that it is the experience of children themselves that is the exact depicting of the situation. As it has been mentioned, children do not receive any support from adults. So they are already victims and they do not receive any support, well, this example is just illustrates that support systems do not work. This means that grown-ups neither respond properly nor makes any effort to investigate the cases of bullying. So far, schools tried to help the victim to adapt rather than the offender to change his behavior. Because when it comes to bullying against LGBTI children, they usually receive advice to change their behavior. But the problem is that those children do not behave in a bad way, but the child is simply, well, different. So that's why there is a lack of empathy in Lithuania, because every child, irrespective of his nationality, race, identity, sexual orientation, must feel safe and must be protected against any degrading behavior. This is the major hindrance that prevents the prevention of bullying against LGBTI children. how often do you receive calls from LGBT children? Could you share the stories that you hear on the helpline? Well, we don't have the specialized statistics. We don't know how many of them were LGBT children. So I have some precise figures. For example, in 2019, we received over 3,000 requests for support in cases of bullying. Approximately 600 school children contacted us because they felt problems, they had problems related to their sexual orientation. So, well, it does make sense to say that bullying is related to the sexual orientation and the problems that children face. Well, I cannot illustrate my speech by very concrete examples, but well, we do feel that sometimes children have fear to reveal or to say something, as Eglė has mentioned. Children are afraid to reveal their sexual orientation to grown-ups, so similar things happen when the children contact our children helpline. They do feel anxiety. They do have fear that they will be pushed away, that they will not be accepted, that they will not be understood. So they are afraid of this negative response. Well, there is a lot of pain and anxiety. So children have very difficult feelings once they are exposed to bullying. And this might have very serious implications on the life of those children, because children are afraid to be in that environment. They find it difficult to concentrate because what they think is not how to learn better, but how to avoid certain places, to avoid certain people. So imagine yourself being a grown-up and imagine that you had to think of these questions on a daily basis. So they do face very negative consequences. When it comes to the experience of the Children Helpline, I'd like to refer to a few surveys. By the way, we are very happy about the support of the Swedish Embassy and about the anti-bullying program implemented. So for 3 years running, we've been conducting surveys in schools about the bullying and the basis for the bullying. So I'd like to share some figures with you. We talked to 6th to 12th graders, approximately over 6,000 children participated. 1/5 said that they were exposed to degrading behavior. Every 10th from this 1/5 the respondents said that they were exposed to bullying on the basis of their sexual orientation. Every 4th child was exposed to bullying because of their allegedly inappropriate behavior. For example, when a boy acted too girlish and so on. Sometimes even grown-ups think that a boy does not act in a way that is typical for a boy, or vice versa. A girl does not act in a way that is typical for a girl. So there should be a clear boundary that irrespective of the character or features or this person's behavior, the person must not be degraded on the basis of his sexual orientation. So this was my message that I wanted to share with you.
You have mentioned about the program called Friends. Could you please comment on the experience of other countries, including Sweden, how they address the problem of bullying? This is the experience that we do our best to make good use of. We focus on prevention programs that have to be implemented at schools and in a consistent rather than sporadic manner. Friends is the program that serves this purpose, and this is the program that covers the entire community of school. It strengthens the role of adults in stopping, recognizing, addressing, and documenting the problem. Basically, it covers all the stages that are important in addressing this program. The focus is on training adults, speaking about the norms existing among children and adolescents. This is the program which was very appealing to us because one can easily adapt it to the specificities of each school. It is not a rigid set of measures, but a set of measures that are suggested for school, and each school can adjust this program considering its own situation. We come to school, we perform assessment, we discuss the situation with teachers, we discuss the strengths and the weaknesses at school and the way forward, how the school could address the degrading behavior more efficiently. This is the experience of Lithuanian schools, and as far as Sweden and its experience in addressing the bullying of young people, I was impressed by the fact that there is a schools inspectorate under the Ministry of Education, and part of this inspectorate supervises the implementation of law on education in different schools, starting from preschool education. And then there is the child ombudsman or children's rights ombudsman that is open to children. Children or their parents may address this ombudsman service if they think that the school fails to ensure their rights. And if it is determined that the school didn't do everything that it was in its power, it carries the liability. These mechanisms are well structured, they operate well, and the schools are not only encouraged, but they are also monitored so that schools have all the evidence in case someone addressed and reported a problem. And if a child didn't address for help, for assistance, this is regarded that the school didn't ensure the circumstances. It's not common to say that the school has nothing to do with it. This is all I wanted to share today. Well, certainly we can learn about, and we are ready to learn from the best practice of other countries as well. You have participated in a number of projects against bullying. Do you think that these measures are sufficient in addressing the problem? To my opinion, the question is, what are our expectations from dissemination campaigns? I would like to say that it is very important to speak loudly about certain problems. For example, we have different campaigns, and the campaign without bullying that is addressed to adolescents. So the main aim is not to address this problem, because we don't believe that it is possible to address it through publicizing or through campaign, but we want to draw everybody's attention to it and to discuss the problem once again, to raise awareness so that people could do whatever depends on them. Therefore, these are very important constituent parts. It is important to have some space and to use the public space for discussions for raising the problem. But the problem itself and the prevention of bullying may happen only when it is systematically addressed in the community, rather than having one person responsible in the entire society. Adult workers at school have to know how to curb the problem and how to employ preventive measures. Schools have to work consistently, including the adults, and I think that publicizing campaigns help to raise awareness. The Children's Line experience demonstrates that it raises awareness, and this is proven by studies. However, there are still some weak points that have to be strengthened, and for example, today's problem, there is one reaction when children are being bullied because of disability. Then we see certain reaction. However, when children, LGBT children, when bullied, we see no reaction. Ms. Žiobienė, I'd like to address you now. We speak about specific problems at school. How do you think bullying should be addressed in the ideal case, and why are there certain obstacles for these measures not to work as they should? Well, I don't want to repeat what has already been said. The bullying issues were started to be addressed at schools quite recently. All the international organizations state that Lithuania is taking the lead in the worst sense of it. When we receive claims about the situation at school, the teachers would refuse to accept it. And it demonstrates either willingness or the lack of willingness to address the problem. We have discussed with different authorities. We managed to amend the law on education. We thought over the different tools and have financial resources for emotional programs to be introduced and active at schools, so that the schools and school community could take preventive actions against bullying. This is the situation in the more general, in the wide sense. However, when we look at specific schools, we see some schools that have progressed a lot, while others haven't. When the situation is complicated, then the ombudsperson or the child's rights departments have to be notified. We have to have assistants in place for the child who is misbehaving, because sometimes children happen to be the victims of aggression at home. Therefore, it is very important to find assistance. Quite often, parents are not willing to accept, to recognize certain aspects. Quite often, they are eager only to punish the perpetrating child, instead of thinking how to address the problem. Quite often, they refuse psychological assistance. They are reluctant to, well, I'm not talking about sexual orientation. In general, it's hard for them to accept the existence of any problem in. As for the LGBT children, it is very hard for them in our society, because we have to admit it lacks tolerance. One thing is to speak, and quite different thing is to ensure this respect for everyone, for the adults as well as for the children. We have to recognize that this issue is tightly interrelated with sexual education at school. It is not being introduced because teachers don't feel comfortable talking about it, and then we kind of feel embarrassed. Really, if a teacher says to a child, you have to be more boy-like or more girl-like, it only demonstrates the lack of knowledge and the lack of understanding. We shouldn't get locked into the situation that I'm tolerant, I'm respectful. The question is whether teachers are really tolerant and respecting different identities of children, and whether they are able to work with children to have sincere reaction to different situations. It is important to understand that school community consists of teachers, children, as well as parents. Parents shouldn't be pushed to the sidelines. Quite often, school is eager to include parents when the children are small, but the role of parents remains very important throughout school. Let's model the situation. For example, I am a child who is being bullied at school, and I can't study, I can't be in this environment. What shall I do? How could the system help me? Well, first and foremost, there has to be an adult who is trusted by the child. And we have social teachers, we have psychologists, but it is very important for a child to have at least one person whom he or she can trust. Or children, the friends can report the problem if the child himself or herself feels very uncomfortable speaking about it. And then the child has to receive psychological assistance. Whatever has happened has to be assessed. The possible aggressor, the bully, shouldn't be necessarily or only punished. In this case, the problem has to be addressed from its roots. One has to think why the problem is like it is and what should be changed. Sometimes they say it is enough to eliminate the child aggressor and then the problem is solved for the time being, but in fact, it doesn't solve anything. other measures have to be undertaken. Well, yes, formally, children cannot be expelled out of school. It happens, and parents are asked to come in. They say the child is hurting the school's reputation, but this is not a decision. Then the child leaves one school, goes to another, and finds victims everywhere because nobody in this particular case has explained to this child what is going on so that he or she could change his or her behavior. And this is not a way to address the problem. Sure, if this child is expelled, then someone else may step in and bully other children. And as Ms. Jasiulionė spoke, we have to work with the entire community in order to change the situation. There's also the lack of knowledge. It's hard to understand sometimes what is identity, why a person may look this way or that way. It's the question of knowledge and mentality. When I talked to school children about this, they said that first and foremost, teachers failed to react. Then they went to the psychologist of the school that advised to hit back, which is not efficient assistance. What do you think? How could we help children in this situation? Do we need more education for teachers and psychologists at schools so that they could react appropriately in these situations? Well, I think that the recognition of bullying as such is rather new. The law was amended in 2017, only in 2017, and these were very little steps. A teacher's mentality also has to be changed. Well, I don't like saying that this is the generational issue. This is the attitude. And this has to happen. Our society has to change. It's just a pity that children have to live here and now. Speaking in terms of legislation, we have everything we need. However, the situation is really sad. Now, I would like to remind our listeners that they are welcome to ask questions. And now, as I have mentioned at the beginning, I would like to ask a question for winning a prize, and that's the prize is going to be a cup and a jumper. The question is, what is providing assistance to LGBT children that are bullied? The first 3 people who answer this question correctly will receive the prize. And now I would like to ask each panelist to summarize and give 1 or 2 pieces of advice. How can we start? How can we begin? And how can the parents do for the LGBT children to start feeling better
Gal
at
aš dar
schools?
norėčiau pasidalinti mūsų patirtimi, kaip mes vedėme mokymus
Eglė.
Lietuvos mokyklose.
I would like to share my
Visiems
experience
primint,
how
kad
we
Lietuvoje vis
did
dar
training at
galioja
schools. I would
toks
like to remind you
keistas
that in our schools
vaiko teisių
we have a very strange
informacijos įstatymas dėl LGBT.
law on
tokia.
information
Ir
regarding the
įstatyme
LGBT.
yra
And
kalbama
this
apie
law has
LGBT ir tai
provision on
prilyginama tam
LGBT
tikrai
and
propagandos formai.
compares,
mes
speaking about them,
bandėme
to a certain form of
kažkokius veiksmus atlikti
propaganda.
mokyklose,
Therefore,
tai
when we
susilaukėm
tried to implement
neigiamos
specific
reakcijos iš
actions at
daugelio
schools,
mokyklų.
we received
Esam
negative
ir
feedback
leidinį
from some
parengę,
of the
kurį
schools.
išsiuntėm
We have a publication
mokytojams į įvairias Lietuvos
and we sent
mokyklas.
it out to different
Ir
schools. schools of
netgi buvo
Lithuania,
mokyklų direktorių, kurie piktinosi, kodėl čia yra siunčiama į mokyklą tokia knyga, kurioje pateikiami patarimai,
were very angry when they received this information, why it's
vaikams,
being
kurie
sent out,
susiduria su
on how
patyčiomis.
to help children who are bullied.
Pernai mes darėme
Last
dvi
year,
fokus grupės,
we had 2 focus
visiškai
groups
kardinaliai priešingose mokyklose. Viena
in
buvo
completely different schools.
Vilniuje, tai buvo
One school was in
prestižinė
Vilnius.
Vilniaus
This
gimnazija,
was a
o kita
prestigious
buvo
school, and
Šalčininkuose.
another school was in
Ir
the district of
turiu
Šalčininkai.
pasakyti, kad Šalčininkuose mokytojų
And
reakcija
in
buvo
this
daug
particular
palankesnė negu
school in
prestižinėje Vilniaus
Šalčininkai, the
gimnazijoje.
reaction of teachers was
Ir
much
mokytojai
more
buvo daug
favorable than
atviresni
that
šitai
of
temai,
the
galbūt
prestigious school.
jie mažiau žino apie LGBT klausimus, mažiau turi išankstinių nusistatymų,
It seems that
o
teachers
Vilniuje
from the
netgi
rural area
sunku buvo
know less about
surinkti
LGBT
mokytojus
and
į
have
diskusiją LGBT
less
klausimais. Tai netgi nepavyko jų sukviesti,
presumptions
kad
about
jie
it.
sudalyvautų
While
toje
it was very
diskusijoje.
hard to
Diskusijai
invite
dalyvavo
teachers from
moksleiviai.
the prestigious school
Tai, o dėl
come to
patarimų,
this
tai
meeting.
visų pirmiausia reikėtų turbūt mums stengtis kažkaip plėsti savo akiratį, daugiau
We have
domėtis,
to
mažiau
expand our
žiūrėti,
point of
ką
view.
kažkokias
As
Facebook'e
for
propagandinės
advice,
žinutes ir tiesiog
and we
stengtis
have to read
padėti
fewer
tiem vaikam
propaganda
ir jų labiau
messages,
netraumuoti.
but rather try to
Šitą
help
problemą
children or
išsprendus
stop
ir
the
tėvai, ir
trauma.
mokytojai labiau būtų gebantis reaguoti
If
į
this-
šitą problemą, nes
we have to
vaikai
ensure that
patys, tai
teachers
jiems
are
yra
more
daug
capable of
paprasčiau
reacting
priimti
in
šitus
appropriate
klausimus, o
way.
suaugusieji kažkaip su
For
begalinė
children,
tokia trauma
it
kažkokia,
is
jiems
easy
net
to
ištarti tą
accept
žodį
it,
yra baisu.
but adults
Tai
seem to be
nežinau, pirmiausia, tai
traumatized even
reikėtų
by the very
pirmas
word of
patarimas rengti
LGBT.
mokymus visiems mokytojams ir mes
The
planuojam tokius
training
mokymus
for all
rengti kitais
teachers would
metais.
help. We
Tai
plan the
jeigu yra
training next
mokyklų,
year,
kurioms būtų aktualu tokie mokymai, kaip
and
kovoti
if
su
certain schools are interested in the
patyčiomis,
training on
kurios
fighting
yra
against
susijęs su
bullying
seksualinė
related
orientacija,
to
galite
sexual
mus kreiptis.
orientation, you may
Ir
address our
planuojam
organization, and we
kažkaip, kad šitie mokymai padėtų
plan
geriau suprasti mokytojams problemą
this training
egzistuojančią ir geriau
so that
reaguoti
it helps teachers to understand the
į
problem
tas
better
patyčias, nes dažnu
and
atveju
to
ta
have
reakcija, jeigu ir yra,
a
tai
more
jinai yra
considerate reaction
netinkama visiškai tuo
towards the
atveju.
problem, because in most
Tėvams taip
cases the
pat, na,
reactions
nežinau,
are not
man
acceptable.
sunku net įsijausti į tą situaciją, kai tu
As for
negali
parents,
priimti savo vaiko, tau yra
it is hard for me even
svarbiau
to
tavo kažkokie
understand the
asmeniniai
situation
neigiami
when you
nusiteikimai,
can't accept your child. Your
negu tavo
negative
vaiko gerovė ir
opinion
laimė.
is more
Tai
important than your child's
sudėtinga dėl
happiness.
tėvų kažką
It is really hard to understand it or
Manau,
to
kad
recommend
kiekvienas jų
something for
turi praeiti
parents.
tam
I
tikrą
think that
procesą,
each of
jeigu
them have to
egzistuoja
go
kažkokie
through a certain
neigiami
process.
nusiteikimai. Ir
If they have
tame
some
procese
negative
reikia
convictions,
ieškoti, nebijoti kreiptis pagalbos į
and
specialistus
parents have
ar
to
į
be
mūsų
brave as
platformą
well. They have to address
ir
the
kažkaip
specialists or to
įveikti
our
tuos
platform
neigiamus
and ask for
jausmus,
help
kad jie
in order
nepadarytų
to
dar
avoid these
didesnės
negative,
žalos
to
vaikams.
work with these negative
Na,
negative
vaikai
feelings so
tai
that not to
tikrai
traumatize
yra
children
visi
further.
šaunuoliai, jie ieško
Children
pagalbos,
are excellent. They
jeigu
look
tarp
for
draugų
help,
neranda jos, tai
and if they
tikrai
can't find
randa
it
daug
among their
informacijos
friends,
internete,
they
jie
find
daug
a lot
geriau
of
viską
information
žino
online,
LGBT
and they
klausimais
seem to know more on LGBT more
ir
than
tiesiog
anyone else.
tikėkime, kad kažkada
Let's
ateis tas
hope
laikas, kai
that the time
LGBT
will come
vaikams
when
vaikų svajonė
LGBT
nebus, kada aš
children
suaugsiu ir galėsiu išvykti į užsienį,
will
tiesiog jie
have
galės, kaip ir visi kiti vaikai, džiaugtis savo vaikystę,
a
be
possibility to
kažkokios
enjoy
diskriminacijos ir
their
neigiamų
childhood
patirčių
instead of
mokykloje.
dreaming about the time when they could live abroad. Jurgita, what are your thoughts on addressing this problem? Well, I would like to go a step backwards and to model the situation on how one can react. For example, if you are the child who is bullied, well, there will be a few pieces of advice for schools as well. Regarding bullying, how they happen, measures to stop bullying have to be focused on specific child, despite the basis of bullying. And this help doesn't mean taking the child to the room of a psychologist. First and foremost, the child has to be listened to, understood what has happened without any rush to give advice. The child has to be simply understood, and this is the very first step if this happens. This should be the reaction: to listen to understand, to learn what the situation is like, and then to think about actions. The second thing that is very important from the individual level is to give a clear message to the child who is misbehaving. And we are not talking about expelling children from schools. Quite often we dramatize the situation and say that children constantly misbehave. But there are very small situations that are overlooked. Just think what has happened. Somebody has said something. But this is important, and the child who is misbehaving has to be clearly told on a very personal level that this behavior is inappropriate. It violates that this behavior is disrespectful. And then other measures have to be focused on a classroom, on a group, because bullying is normally it normally involves more than two people, because there are observers, there are supporters, not just the two people, the bully and the person being bullied. And then this problem has to be addressed in the entire classroom. And we also have to understand what's going on in the entire school, that certain problems happen often. And yes, school employees have to be educated. They have to understand what it means to be LGBTI child or adolescent. But the very fact that teachers and parents have to improve on their reactions, and that would be a great achievement. Because if we see certain behavior as bullying and it has to be stopped, this is appropriate reaction. This is just inappropriate behavior and it has to be stopped. And this way, we will contribute to safety and security of LGBTI children who are sometimes afraid to ask for help. Regarding the pieces of advice on how we can contribute, how each of us can contribute, well, we have to expand our point of view. We have to understand our own fears, because there are certain subjects that we are afraid to tackle. We have to talk about different families, different sexual orientations. And each of us has to ask what I am afraid of. And we have to try to address these issues, because people are diverse and they have the right to be diverse. And each of them is going to feel safe and secure if our reaction towards them is appropriate. I would like to support educational activities, different campaigns, awareness-raising campaigns. I'll stop there because I would like to leave some space for other panelists. Edita, well, I don't want to repeat what the colleagues have said. I think that trust and respect are very important. All children have to be taught respect to everything, and sexual identity is very important. Adults have to teach children respect. The aspect of trust is highly significant. The child should not be afraid to tell his or her parents about whatever happens. And the parents have to demonstrate the same level of respect and the same level of love. There has to be trust in the group. As the psychologist has rightly mentioned, that bullying is taking place in a certain scene, so to speak. There are viewers, there are supporters, and the children have to understand that they cannot be viewers, they cannot allow bullying, they cannot allow their friend to be bullied. And they have to trust their adults, while adults have to ensure that the children are not misled. The question is about teachers, because sometimes teachers say this is not normal, all LGBT people have to be to receive medical treatment, and one LGBT girl was advised to wear skirt so as to attract boys' attention. How could one communicate with teachers like that? Well, teachers should not forget about the enhancement of their qualification. However, if they are not supported by their management, they may express their personal negative attitudes at school, and they even educate children, instill hatred. We have heard about it. I think that the Ministry of Education should really recharge the system, and maybe then positive changes will come forward. The sexual education itself is rather new at schools, so I think that we still have a long way to go. Because the NGOs cannot perform the work of the ministry. We do as much as we can, and we arrange training at schools. But this has to be done in the entire Lithuania, in big towns, in small towns, in villages, everywhere where we have schools. Teachers should also know their boundaries, and they should not express their personal views. Rather they have to use the educational material. But now, sometimes it depends on teachers' personal attitude on certain issues. Jurgita, you have mentioned that in Sweden, schools carry certain responsibility. What is your opinion how we should communicate with this type of teachers? What kind of liability they carry? Indeed, it is sad to hear about it, and sometimes I feel helpless. Yeah, people express their own personal opinion, and we do not have one single opinion for schools, so teachers have a right to say what they think. Now I'm looking to Ms. Žiobienė. Could you please give us a piece of advice what can be done from the point of view of a child? What can we do if we face such teachers' reactions? Shall we look for someone else at school who has different point of view or different reactions, but it may be very difficult. It may be difficult to address these issues. Me personally, I don't know what to do. I don't know how we can work with teachers like that. If they have certain opinion, we cannot change their opinion. But sometimes, well, probably parents can address school management and speak about this problem. But then it depends whether parents feel safe. This would probably be the way to start working on it. Well, I really don't know who could help, the municipalities or the ministry. I don't know really. Edita, would you like to add something? Indeed, the question is really difficult. Mental or physical disability would not suscitate such reactions, or their management would really reprimand this type of speech. However, when it comes to sexual orientation, we still have to be brave. We have to be brave to speak about it so that teachers, teachers should respect children, should not sort them out, but rather help them to be themselves, to be authentic. And if school administration decides to stand for the teacher, and it happened in one school, and only at the higher level it was noted that the behavior of teachers and school management was inappropriate, that the lack of respect was covered up by some other values. I would like to say that we have to do our best and be braver. Since our time is almost up, and we still have a few questions, I am going to address you, Edita. The question is, if the majority of parents and children are against sexual education and want to leave it for the family, what do you think about the situation? Would sexual education program be implemented? Should we think about the measures as are employed in Sweden? Well, I think it's not normal to leave it up to the adults to learn about sexual education, and some parents think that sexual education is something like teaching children the different techniques of sexual intercourse. Therefore, parents have to be explained what sexual education contains. When there's a lack of knowledge and complete miscommunication, then it is covered up by negative opinion, by negation. people have to be encouraged to respect each other. And probably then the sexual education will not be regarded as danger. Well, thank you. I would like to say that this discussion was happened by implementing the program which is called project that is called Choice. Regarding the prices, we'll inform you in our comments. Thank you very much. Thank you for presentations. Thank you for listening. You'll be able to listen to the recordings on our website nztl.lt.